I hate it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I feel like my reviews of eyeshadows recently have been disappointing, and I don't think that we're gonna find anything new here. We're gonna talk about the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes Moonlight Edition. It's a limited edition palette. It's retailing for $68. You can buy it at Sephora or on Mario's website. Let's talk about why I bought this. I adore the original Ethereal Eyes palette. I love this thing. I get in here all the time. It's got some good dips going in it. I prefer some shades over the other shades, but overall, I really love pulling out this palette. Is it like 100% perfect? Do I love every single shade in it? No, but I get a lot of use out of this palette. It's one of those palettes that I just come back to time and time again when I don't know what kind of makeup I want to wear. It's a completely reliable palette. When Mario announced that he was going to be releasing a new edition of it, I was excited, especially after I found out that there was going to be some cooler tones in it. I have a cool leaning undertone. A lot of times neutral makeup just pulls warm on me anyway, and sometimes things that are supposed to be cool toned will warm up a lot on my skin. I don't know what that's about, but I love leaning into the cool tones to either come back to neutral, or I just really like the way that cool tones look on me, like grays, things like that. I just really like them. When this palette was announced and shown to us, I was like, bet, because I already love the original, this is going to be part 2, but just with colors that I think are going to be more useful to me. And I turned out to be wrong. First, I'm just going to review this, and then I'm going to do a little bit of comparison. Both of the palettes, just for anyone who has the original and is interested in this one. If you're only interested in this one and you don't have this one, comparisons are not going to be very useful to you. The packaging is certainly more upgraded than Makeup by Mario's original packaging. Packaging is like white, but it's not shiny white like I think his regular palettes are. And when you open up the palette, you have like the silver around the shade, which can be distracting to some people. I don't mind that. I don't feel like it distorts the color too much. It just is like maybe a little hard to look at. Again, he's gone with the naming mechanism that he went with on the first one. It's a very sleek packaging, very cute. I think this packaging would be great for makeup artists, also would be great for a normal person. Very compact and easy to store, so I think everything has been nailed in that way. Where we run into trouble is using the shadows. I think the mattes in here work pretty well. They're not my favorite matte formula, which is saying something because I really love the original Ethereal Eyes formula. It's not the same in my mind. I had trouble with the two darkest shades, so the navy here and the black. I got a lot of fallout from both of them, and actually today I've been wearing my eyeshadow look since about 10:30 this morning. I didn't touch up or anything, and you can see like all of my eyeshadow. It's not the mascara, it's the eyeshadow, because this mascara is a tried and true mascara, just like fell out onto my under eyes. And that just doesn't happen to me very often, so it's very strange that this formula is. Now, with the old formula, I've heard that some people had that issue. It's not a thing that ever happened to me with the old Ethereal Eyes formula. Dark shades, they have a propensity for that, but it's just kind of like, I haven't had like raccoon eyes like this in like a little bit of time. It's not the worst. It kind of looks like I did it on purpose, but like it's certainly a thing that happens when I use this eyeshadow palette. There is a formula in here that I'm not sure Mario has ever done before. It was a surprise to me because I thought it was just a matte shade, but it isn't. It's this shade here. I believe it is the shade EM1, and it appears to be a cream matte. There is like the smallest micro shimmer to it, which makes it look more like a satin. The way that that shade sits on my eyes, I don't quite like. I just wish that had been a straightforward matte. I mean, that's not eyeshadow that I'm very interested in using. I guess some people could like it. It's like the softest hint of a sheen. I guess it could be considered ethereal. I didn't really love that. A lot of times when I like a matte formula, I will use a palette for the mattes, and then if I want to take shimmers from elsewhere, I will. With the way that this is set up, I wouldn't really pull this out for the mattes because the mattes aren't my favorite mattes, and I have issues with the darkest shades that I don't have with some other formulas. For point of reference, some of my favorite eyeshadow formulas are Viseart eyeshadows, and I also really enjoy the ones from Hindash, which both of those formulas are a little more firmly pressed than the ones from Makeup by Mario. That could be the main differences to why I don't love the mattes in here. However, I really had a good time with this matte, and this brown right here. And oftentimes when I was building an eye look, I was using those. I also got on well with the gray. But other than that, the mattes kind of were just whatever to me. And then this shade up here, which I'm not sure what the formula is actually called, is our only like traditional kind of shimmer satin shade. It's actually very beautiful. It's a bit of a blue gray, so if that's not what you're looking for, this might not be for you, but I kind of like a blue gray. I feel like we don't really get into like actually elephant gray. And I feel like that's what we're getting out of this. I have no issues with it. Oftentimes I was using it to blend the shimmers into the mattes and kind of give it a more seamless look. And I feel like it worked really well for that. I really have no complaints about it. It's not a super exciting shade to me. It's not something that I would use a lot. I did use it as a base for the shimmers a couple of times to give it a little more something to pump it up a little bit. It was like fine that it was there. I do like the color of it. I didn't love the formula color or anything so much that it was like a standout shade, like something that I would think to pull out this palette specifically to use. Like in conjunction with other things, I think it works in the palette, especially with like the gray and the blue that are in this palette. I think a lot of people really thought that this blue was gonna like do something, and I did think it was gonna be a little more muted than it ended up being, but it still doesn't not work for me. It doesn't feel like a pop of color, even though I feel like it kind of appears as a pop of color. But when you blend it in with the black or the grays in here, it looks like it belongs. It doesn't look like a standout. I use it as a crease shade, and I didn't find that it distracted from the grays or even the other, you know, more nude mattes that are in this palette. Those parts of the palette, totally fine. They're not exceeding expectations, and whenever we're at the price point of this palette, I think things need to exceed expectations a little bit more. It all was fine, but it wasn't great. Some people will like those mattes and get on with them, and that would be totally fine with them. And I think if I liked more of the palette, I would be a little more on board with them. I'd be like, okay, these are a great vehicle for the thing that I'm most excited about, which I thought was going to be the shimmers. The shimmers in this Ethereal Eyes palette are a letdown. And I can't 100% explain what the difference is because I've swatched them next to each other on my hands versus the old ones. I feel like they look the same in swatches, but there's something about them on the eye and the way they sit on the eye that is different from the old formula, which was the main selling point for this palette for me, is that there was new shimmers in the Ethereal Eyes formula. Let's talk about the one that I think is the most exciting and would say would be the main selling point for me for this palette. It's the shade right here. It's the shade EM3. It's a white shimmer with a blue sheen. It's a really pretty shimmer. I have no complaints about it. I don't know if it's the size of the shimmer particles or the amount of shimmer that's in it. I just don't feel like on my eyes it's as impactful as it could seem. This is from Shine by SD. It's the shade Ice Blink, and I'm just gonna swatch it next to the Ethereal Eyes shade. On top is the Makeup by Mario shade, and then on the bottom is the one from Shine by SD. There's something just like a little powdery looking to the shimmer from Makeup by Mario. It doesn't look as wet as the one from Shine by SD. Now the Shine by SD shade gives me the vibes of the old Ethereal Eyes formula a little bit more than the ones from this current iteration. I think if the selling point of this palette to you was this shade right here, which I think is the most unique shade that Mario has like put in a palette, if that's what you're looking for, I highly recommend looking for single shadows from indie brands that are going to have the sparkle that you want. So maybe you would like a pink sheer sparkle or a blue sheer sparkle, which you're going to be able to find that in a bunch of different brands. A lot of people have made a lot of great content about that. I don't have content like that because I don't really talk about single shadows in such a way. Don't buy a $70 eyeshadow palette if you are just looking for a shade that does that. Basically, the rest of this eyeshadow palette is pretty boring and standard fare as far as color goes. We're not reinventing the wheel here. That's just like the one special shade in here, and I don't think it's that special. You know how a lot of people will buy the Pat McGrath palettes for the special shades? For one special shade in here that I think is maybe the most unique thing Mario has put out, I don't think this palette is worth it. I just recommend finding some single shadows or a single shadow to scratch that itch as opposed to like buying a whole palette. I understand that you might be someone who shops at Sephora and this might be like easier for you to get your hands on. I promise you it's worth the wait and paying the $5 shipping on the $6 eyeshadow or the $10 eyeshadow to just get the one shade that you are after as opposed to buying a whole palette. That's my 2 cents. If you were buying this as an alternative to like a Pat McGrath palette because it kind of gives the vibe, it's not like the same, but it kind of gives the vibe of like Mothership 1 from Pat McGrath. That Mothership palette was just half off. It goes on sale. On sale, it's about the same price as the Ethereal Eyes palette, and I would say that's worth your time and money. It's a true cool tone palette. It has a lot more punch to it than this, and it also has one of my favorite eyeshadow shades in it ever that I duped. I did a video where I tried to dupe that shade. So yeah, if you were buying it for this white shade, it's not worth it for the white shade. It's a cute shade. It's not like the best I've ever tried, and it's not worth the whole palette. When it comes to the more like neutral or common shimmer shades, there is something about them that is lacking. I really thought that this shade right here was going to be my jam. I believe it's the shade EM7. It looks like a lot of eyeshadows that I wear all of the time and I really love. And I will say of the shimmers, including the blue one, it is my favorite shimmer in the palette, but it still leaves a lot to be be desired. I have this in singles, and I feel like this is something that there's similar shades in other like neutral eyeshadow palettes. Even though this is the best performing one in this palette to me, in my opinion, and I think the reason that this one has a little more of that wet look sheen is it has a stronger base. It's still a very sheer base, but it has a stronger base, and I think that allows the glitter to really give something. I think that the shimmers are too consistent. In my experience, when the sparkles are like a little more inconsistent when you're putting them in application, like hits them better. So oftentimes like having different sizes of particles of shimmer tends to really give you that like super glimmery disco ball impact. And that's not what everyone's going for. I just think that things feel a little bit too scattered here and just seem a little bit less streamlined. I'm gonna swatch a couple other shadows that I really love that I feel like aren't gonna be dupes for it, but have similar vibes and intentions. I'm not trying to sell you these shades instead of the palette. I'm just going to show you like have better of this in my collection, even if it's not exactly the same. And if you are into this kind of like taupey shimmer, then you probably also already have it. On the top here, we have Victoria Beckham's Mink, then the Ethereal Eyes shade, and then we have Lithium from Urban Decay, and then we have Smoky Quartz from Charlotte Tilbury. They're all varying levels of shiny, but like you can see that like I have this. Those shades I like more. I'm probably going to use them more than I would pull this palette out specifically to use that shade. The shimmer, EM11, I don't like this one. It's not as sparkly as the last one, and I'm not sure it's intended to do so. But I think because it's like trying to be like a cool toned gold, it just is nothing. It kind of like is this weird nothing. It's like almost beige, but like it's like not as shimmery as the other shade. It's just kind of falls so flat. Ugh. And then this final shimmer here, EM6, it feels like we're treading familiar territory with the previous Ethereal Eyes, and it is more gold, and I don't really like doing like warm and cool tones too much mixed together, and I just feel like that pulls a little orange. Orange and blue are complementary colors, so it works. It's not bad. It's like I don't think it was wrong to add that. I would just never use that orange shimmer. I'm not one to do that. It does kind of give the vibes of the Urban Decay Moon Dust eyeshadow in the shade Space Cowboy, but it's not as special. Space Cowboy is unique in the way that it has both like warm and cool shimmers, and the silver sparkles really come through on Space Cowboy. Because the shimmer in here is like the same color as the base, it doesn't give the shimmer really much to pop off of. The Ethereal Eyes shades, the shimmers in it are at its best whenever the shimmers are maybe at odds with the base tone of the shadow. So it gives just something to play off of. Honestly, I don't think this is worth $68. I don't think it's worth whatever sale you would get from the Sephora sale. I actually just like don't really recommend this eyeshadow palette. I think like some people will really love it. I understand why people love it, but I'm coming at it from like a much different angle. Not a much different angle. I'm coming at it from the angle that I love the Ethereal Eyes so much, and this just pales in comparison. And now I'm going to start talking about comparisons to the old Ethereal Eyes and talk about what changed, what's different, and we're going to start with the packaging. This is the original Ethereal Eyes, and it's in aluminum packaging, and this is just in a plastic that's a little more matte. There is the silver accent on the back, which I'm not like, I don't need the silver accent on the back like the old one has, but that is something that has changed. The packaging is like a slight bit thicker and chunkier. I kind of like that. It's not a ton, so it's not like it takes up a ton more space. This one's a little more weighty. It feels a little more luxe to me. I like that. I'm one of those people who likes a weighty feeling product. It's not super weighty. Like I don't think the weight difference is actually that much, but like this one's just a little bit weightier. It's the original one just kind of, I really like the weightiness. Yeah, how messed up my old one is. When it comes to the shades in this one, I think even in the pan, you can kind of tell that there's just like kind of a lot more shimmer going on in the old palette than there is going on in the new palette. It just feels like it's streamlined in like a way that I don't really care for. Back to the packaging real quick. It's not a significant downgrade. It just feels like a slight downgrade in my opinion, but it's not like when Pat McGrath went from making her quads in the beautiful weighted lacquered packaging to the much cheaper plastic packaging that isn't as beautiful as the original lacquered packaging or as weighty. I think he streamlined it more. This is definitely going to be better and slimmer for makeup artists and lighter. I understand that. Like, that's okay. I do prefer that the old Ethereal Eyes was only mattes and shimmers with the exception of the brown metallic in here. Whereas in the new Makeup by Mario, we have that weird cream shade that has a slight sheen to it. The one thing that I will say that's different about the formulas is I think the old matte formula, it has a lot of kick up and it's very powdery, and I don't think it's very firmly pressed. And I don't think the new mattes are super firmly pressed, but they are definitely firmer than the old formula. For some people, that will be a pro. I find that it made the formula a little harder to blend. I just felt like I was blending more, not in like an incredibly significant way. Not so much that I found it annoying to work with the mattes in the new Ethereal Eyes palette, but they just didn't blend as easily as the ones from the old one. That was like a little off-putting to me, but I know that when the original Ethereal Eyes launched, a lot of people didn't like the mattes, so I think that he was trying to improve on those mattes based on the feedback from the first Ethereal Eyes, because a lot of people claimed that they were too powdery. They didn't like how soft they were. I liked the softness of them, but like that's like a preference thing. So I think he made what he thought was an improvement. I can commend that. Like he was like listening to consumer feedback. I think they are a little more firmly pressed. There's still kick up when you use them, but it's like not the same as when you use old one. I've done like, I don't know, like 10 looks with this palette, and you can see like it's not super dirty, but like you can see how messy this one gets. And you know, that's going to be a problem for someone. I don't mind my makeup looking like it's used. I don't normally use the mirrors on my products, so that's fine that it's messy there as well. And all it would take is like a quick wipe down. Both of them do suffer from being hard to clean after you get some of the eyeshadow or some other makeup on it, just because of the texture of the two. So just to know that if you need this to be pristine white, it's not going to stay that way for very long. So I also think that the shimmer shades are a little firmer than they were in the old formula, and I think that's to the detriment. It's not that a firm pressing of like that ethereal look can't be done, because the Moon Dust eyeshadows from Urban Decay are like very densely pressed. I think in what Mario's trying to do, I think that the ethereal shimmer was much more successful in the first palette, that, and like I don't know, like the shimmers just like didn't look as good on in the new palette. And the way I can kind of like prove this, it's like anecdotal. It meant a lot to me. I had been wearing this palette for like 5 days straight. I was like only doing eye looks from this palette, just trying to wrap my head around it. And I was like, this isn't hitting, but I can't tell if it's not hitting. So then I was inspired to use the original Ethereal Eyes palette, and I put this on my eyes, and I came up the stairs to like talk to Tiff, and I didn't tell them that what I was using on my eyes. Unprovoked, they said, "Oh my God, your eyeshadow is so sparkly and beautiful." For 5 days straight, I was wearing this. Not once did they comment on how my eyeshadow looked. I wore this, the old one time, and they immediately were like, "Your eyeshadow looks so pretty." So I think there is something to that. I do think we were retreading some ground, like not exactly the same. This shade right here and like this shade right here have a little bit of similarities to it. The one from original Ethereal Eyes is a little bit lighter, which is probably why I like it, but you can kind of tell that the old formula looks like more wet and sheeny than the new formula. I don't know if that's like coming across as well. I just like, it's really hard to catch that. And like I said, in finger swatches, I have not been able to like really see it. It's just like on the eyes, they're not hitting as hard as the old sparkle. And that's like all I wanted from them. That's like all I wanted was like the same exact thing, but in this blue formula. I do think that Mario was like kind of listening to feedback, because a lot of people that we expected to really love the old Ethereal Eyes palette like kind of panned it at the time. I know that Lauren May Beauty has like come around to it after she said she didn't really like it. I know Amanda Z didn't like the Ethereal Eyes palette. I know Teresa's Dead didn't like. There was a lot of people who like just didn't like the original Ethereal Eyes palette and said it wasn't worth their money. But like I liked it from the start, and then I just really loved it over time. It's like, again, I mean, you can see it's like one of my favorite palettes. So this just didn't scratch the same itch for me, which is unfortunate, because I do prefer a lot of the colors in here to this original palette. These are the kind of mattes that do pull a little bit warm on me, but like they still look really good, and they don't look too warm on me, even though like the one shade's like a straight up like orange brown. I don't know, I just love the way that this eyeshadow looks on me. I never really liked any of the looks I did with this. I know that a lot of you probably already know this. This eyeshadow formula isn't really good for graphic looks. I tried to do a graphic thing with the blue, and it just kind of ended up all over my face. Again, that fallout from that matte, like just, it was like, I couldn't control it. With a blending brush, it worked fine, but like trying to like do detailed work, I just like didn't want to do it. Tiff gave me the permission. I am gonna actually return this palette. I don't make it a habit of returning makeup, but the last time I returned something is unfortunately also a Makeup by Mario product. I want to love Makeup by Mario's stuff so much more than I do. Like this was like a home run for me. This wasn't really a home run for me. I don't really care for this. I don't really care for, I just like, I wish I liked more from his brand, because I think what he's trying to do with a lot of his stuff, I think is looks really great. It just hasn't been successful for me. So I'm going to return this one. And I'm thinking actually of buying I swatched the Charlotte Tilbury holiday palette recently, and it was so pretty. And there's so much prettier than this, so much prettier than this. And that's pink. And famously, I hate pink. I don't like pink. I even have merch that says I don't like pink. But it actually was much more compelling to me than this. And you know, I love the original Beautyverse palette, so why maybe the second Beautyverse palette will be a home run. Not that I need to buy an eyeshadow palette. I also swatched some other things that I was interested in. I'm just bummed that the first eyeshadow palette that I was really, really, really excited about, that I went out and bought with my own money, like just wasn't appealing to me. I've been really excited actually about a lot of the eyeshadow palettes I received in PR, especially the ones from Bella Beauty Bar, but I've been really enjoying the Fighter palette from Fantasy Cosmetica. Like, I've been really enjoying them. I tried the Lisa Eldridge eyeshadows recently, didn't like them. I don't really love this new Mario palette. So I don't know what's going on with me in eyeshadow. It's like, I want to love it again. I've fallen out of love with eyeshadow palettes recently, and I really thought with the releases this year that I was going to really feel that way about them. But no, I still think I'm a single girly at heart. Anyway, that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you happen to be new to my channel is about me loving my makeup collection first and foremost, and helping myself and help you be more discerning when we are deciding to make a makeup purchase. Sometimes I do reviews like this one with the Ethereal Eyes palette that you just watched, and what I try to do is be as informative as I can. And a lot of the times my reviews are based on vibes and how much I personally will use something, and if it's going to get a bad review if I don't think I would use it a lot, because if I don't see it in my collection, it having a home there, then it doesn't deserve a spot in my makeup collection. So if that sounds good to you, I would love to have you subscribe, and make sure to like this video. I'm on Patreon and I have channel memberships. Those are both linked down below. Over there, you'll find an additional video every month. It's just a different way to support me, not necessarily a better way to support me, but thank you to all my current members and patrons. You're the absolute best. I really appreciate you. Thank you also to anyone who's ever been a member or patron. I really appreciate you too. I have links in the pinned comment to help families in Gaza and to help people affected by the recent hurricanes in the United States. If you have the means to help them, please do so. And that's that. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to follow your haute, and you'll find me. And I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth. Tits out.